Today, we are going to talk about lenses, one of my favorite things. I think most photographers love glass. So we're going to talk about equipment on this show. We're going to cover all sorts of different lenses and how to use them, what you can shoot with them. You know, I see a lot of those questions online and people ask, well, what lens should I get for this or that? So that's one of the things that we're going to cover. So today, we're going to talk about Sony's newest lens. As of today, they just recently announced the 135-1.8 G Master. You can see I have a picture of it right here on the screen. And so I was fortunate enough to have Sony send me this lens about a week before they announced it. I got to play with it a little bit and shoot it, and I even took pictures of it, as you can see. But for me, I call it the wait is over, because this is one of my favorite lenses. And how can you say, well, Robert, how did you know that that was your favorite lens? Well, because I also, I started shooting Sony in 2013, and I have A-mount cameras. I started on an A77, an A99, A99 II, and I have the 135-1.8 A-mount. And when I first shot that lens, it really reminded me of the 150 from my Hasselblad back in the beginning of my days of wedding photography. It's just such a beautiful lens, such beautiful bokeh, just creamy and buttery. I loved it. So for me, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this lens. And it's absolute portrait perfection. I mean, this lens is a portrait lens made for portrait photographers, but there are a few other things you can do with it, like sports, and I'm going to show you some images from that. So here it is on my A7R III. I wanted to take some pictures of it, and Sony actually used some of these images in the announcement and on Alpha Universe. So if you want to see more of that, you can go to alphauniverse.com and check that out. But I just had fun shooting the lens and playing with it. And but I really wanted to just get out and shoot it, right? So once I received it, I was like the kid in a candy store. I grabbed it from FedEx and unpacked it and put it on my camera and got out there. But before I show you some of those images, let's geek out a little bit. Now, for you guys, I want to tell you, I think I am a good photographer, but I am not the technical photographer. So for me, even technicalities and talking technique and that is a little bit challenging. Here's some real basic statistics. You know, it's 3 5/8 inches long and 5 inches long. It's 5 inches, 3 5/8 inches long and 5 inches high, I guess, right? And it's 36.6 ounces. So I got out my 135-1.8 A mount and compared it to the E mount camera, the new 135 G Master, and they're right about actually the same size. But the G Master, although it feels sturdy as you would think from a G Master lens, it was actually lighter than the A mount lens. So they did make it lighter. One of the things this lens has in it is dual front and rear XD linear motors that can achieve super fast focus. So this is what allows a portrait lens like this, which is not normally known to be fast focusing, but it focuses really fast, so you can use it to shoot sports. Now, these are the same motors that Sony put in the 400 2.8 G Master that they announced 6 months or so ago. So now here's the technical data. Now I'm going to try to explain this to you in my best terms. So they tested something what's called MTF. So I wrote it down here. It stands for Module Transfer Function, and this describes how well a lens can reproduce fine details, measured as the degree of contrast achieved between finely spaced lines. And so lensrentals.com did the tests on this, and I put a little note. This is the graph from their site, so thank you, Lens Rentals. But you see down at the bottom right, it says, by far, as test goes, the results are pretty simple. This is the sharpest lens that we've ever tested, period. And at last count, there are 300 plus lenses tested. So you see the graphic line on the front, 135-1.8, that is the G Master. Now they tested it on, this is where I'm going to get it wrong, they tested it something at 50 and they tested it at 100. And it outperformed all the lenses at 50 where they test most things, but they thought for the heck of it, they're going to test it at 100. And basically, to explain that a little bit, I read it. So right now we have the A7R III is like a 42 megapixel sensor. Sometime in the future, we could have 100 megapixel sensors and we could have 150 megapixel sensors. But what that means is when they tested it at 100 is this lens will actually be sharper and show more detail once we have bigger megapixels. So it's a great investment. You're going to buy it now. It's the sharpest lens that Lens Rental has ever tested. And should you keep this for 10 years and we have 150 megapixel sensors, then it's going to be even sharper in the future. So there's my technical explanation of that. Just some basics, the buttons on the side. It has the focusing ring. It has the number 4, the round button on the side. Now you can program that button to do anything, more or less. You can put eye autofocus there. You can lock on focus, all those things. You can program that right in your Sony bodies. Of course, you have your aperture ring, your autofocus on and off. And then number 7, the click. That is so you can click your aperture on and off. So if you want to turn the aperture because the aperture ring's right on the lens and it makes little clicking noises, or if you turn it off, it just runs smooth. And that's also a nice feature that videographers like. So what's the first thing that you're going to do? It's a portrait lens, so I was going to go out and shoot portraits. So I shot portraits. First off, first models I could get was my daughter and some of her friends. So one of the first things I wanted to see is what did the bokeh look like in this lens? You talk about a telephoto lens. Everyone likes bokeh. It's the big buzzword, the B word, the bokeh. And so I went downtown and I wanted to see what it looked like in the lights. And so here's a picture of my daughter. And you see the bokeh, a little sharper, closer up in the background. But then look at that. Look at the bokeh in that lens. It's so beautiful. Just how nice and round the bokeh is and how soft it makes it in the background. And I think I shot this wide open at 1.8 because I wanted to really test that and see that. And then here we're on the bridge and the cars are coming at us, and you see the lights and the beer sign in the background. And notice the flare on the lights on the cars. This effect, you have to usually shoot your lens at probably 16, 22, 11, something like that. But this was shot at 4.5. So 4.5 was my aperture. And I think it's because the cars are moving towards me, but it's kind of a nice little bonus effect that you get, with the headlights on the cars. I did some, perspective. This is a windmill blade that's in downtown Minneapolis. And I lit all this with my Profoto B10. So it's a nice portable light. I just brought a light stand and set it where I wanted it and shot. I can adjust the light with the app on my phone. So great little run around light. So one of the things that I did the first day that I got it was I wanted to see, how out of focus the background was at each aperture. So I took it out. Now I know these aren't fancy portraits, so I don't want to hear comments like, oh, those are terrible pictures. I just wanted to see what the background looked like. So as you can see, f8, I did it 2.0, 2.8, background still nice and soft. 4.0, 5.6, f8. I mean, even at f8, look at that. I mean, it's still, you're starting to see the stuff in the foreground, but the background's nice and soft. And all the way up to 22. I mean, you almost have to be at f22 to see almost everything in the background. Even at 16 and at 11, the background, way back there is still soft. So that was pretty impressive. So you're going to get nice, soft backgrounds, even up to f11. This is an image my daughter actually made signs. We have a pond across the street. The kids play hockey in the winter. And she made a sign out of icicles. And so I was wanted to just snap a picture of the sign for her. But then I saw my boy in the background. So I was like, oh, let's see what it looks like. So I just did a little nice composition there and timed it just right. So he's got a puck in the net. And then, of course, I started to shoot some portraits, of him. So it was a little snow out there. So I shot a nice portrait of him. And then the next thing I do, I shoot a lot of sports. My kids play sports. And I wanted to see what it looked like out on the ice. Now, especially shooting hockey, I like to shoot around the net, and I want to see the defense and the offense, either the goalie stopping the goal and the person shooting it. But here, I just sort of knew with the 135 that I wanted to see how it isolated the athlete coming down the ice. So this again is wide open at 1.8. So I really like a wide aperture lens when shooting sports because I really want to focus on that particular athlete. So this does that really well. So depending on the sport, it might be good a little bit for baseball. But here's around the net. Like I did it, it's a little tight for around the net, but I love this image because this is my daughter's team. This isn't my daughter, but you can see the smile on her face as she knows she just made a goal. If you see the puck just behind the goalie crossing over the line, she knows she made it. And the autofocus is so fast. I mean, that's the thing with the linear motor in this. You can shoot this lens as a sports lens. It's not just a portrait lens. I mean, it focuses fast. It has amazing eye autofocus. I shot some fine art stuff. It's still, we're just wrapping up winter here in Minnesota. So I went out and again, I wanted to see what the depth of field looked like. But the one thing I knew when Sony gave me this lens was that I needed to shoot something great. I needed to create something. So I only had about a week before I had to give it back. And so I called up a local bridal salon that I do some work for. And long story, I put a shoot together because I wanted to go out and I wanted to shoot in the snow. Now, about 4 days out, we had a 30% chance of snow. And so I said, let's shoot on this day. We went to the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, which is a beautiful arboretum with trees and you name it. And I knew I'd have some good stuff to work with out there. Well, we got lucky. Not only did we 30% chance, we got a 100% chance of snow. It snowed probably 8-9 inches that day, and it snowed all day. But look at the depth of field in this lens. So these are some hedges that are next to each other. And I put the girls in between the hedges and it just let them fall off in the background. Again, this is lit with the ProPhoto B10. Here's a horizontal shot of the same thing, just a little bit different perspective. So in this one, you see a little bit more of the focus of the branches that are closer to her and then just how beautiful it falls off. The eye autofocus, like I mentioned, works fast. And the great thing about eye autofocus in Sony cameras is that it works through veils. So those of you who shoot weddings, you can see the snow there. Now here's in their sculpture garden. So I'm going to show you a quick difference again with strobe and without strobe. So this is natural light. This is what it looks like. Available light, no strobe. You do see the snowflakes in there, but add a little light in there and look at that. It just makes it beautiful. Like when I light things, I like to, especially outside, even in the summer, if I'm shooting a portrait, it's one reason I bought the B10 was because I want to use a little bit of flash and I want to pop just a little bit in there, but I don't want it to look flashed. I just want to give it enough to brighten the colors and maybe get some catch lights in the eyes. But again, like this is just such a beautiful picture showing the, sculpture nicely out of focus, the trees in the background. Same thing, changed angles. I put them in front of a dark background. Again, just a little bit of light popped in there. It really helps the snow jump out against the black. The light really helps illuminate the snowflakes when it falls. And this lens is so sharp. I mean, corner to corner, it's sharp. So here's some close-ups. We did some, nice, again, more traditional type portraiture. And so you see like how beautiful it is. I think I was using a little bit of available light here. And then this next image, so this is the next frame after the one that I showed you, but I zoomed it way in. I shot it in the same proportion as the last one, but I cropped this in really close to her face so that you could see, actually how sharp it is. I mean, look at her eyelashes. I mean, you can see the lines in her face. Now, most probably females don't want to see themselves that closely and the lines that sharp. But for this point of how sharp this lens is, I wanted to show you that illustration. And then I asked him to bring along a red dress too, just to pop a little bit of color in there. But overall, I mean, I was so excited. This lens is everything that I wanted it to be. Of course, I had to give it back, so I don't have one. I do think they come out in about the middle of May, somewhere in that time frame. So you can go out and get yours too. I think it's going to be right around the $1,800 mark, but for the quality of lens you get, I think it's very worth it. Ever since I started shooting Sony, and there's just some more example of eye autofocus, the Sony makes you want to play. And it makes me want to pick up my camera and go shoot because I'm even more excited to do it. But, you can go out there and be playful. But look as I toggle back and forth, look at her eyes. I used eye autofocus here. I asked her to blow the snow so that her eyes stayed in focus. And it locks on, keeps it there, especially even, in a shot like that. So If you want to find out more about the lens or any other Sony lenses or artisans, you can go to alphauniverse.com. If you want to find out more and follow us more, you can do that. We have a website, of course, that goes with this show where we will put up all the content and show notes and things like that. Of course, you can find us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So please follow us, like us, love us, tell your friends about us. And thank you very much for watching, and look for another episode right here in the future.